Every morning, just as dawn crept over the sleepy town of Willowbrook, a small diner on the corner of 5th and Maple came alive with the sound of sizzling bacon and clinking cups. Among the regulars sat an old man, frail, quiet, and always dressed in the same worn-out brown coat. Most people barely noticed him, but not her. Maria, the young black waitress with tired eyes and an unbreakable smile, made sure his table was always spotless and his coffee warm. She never knew his name. He never said much, only nodded, leaving a crumpled $5 bill under the plate every single time. The other staff teased her for wasting time on him. "Why you babying that old white man? He don't even tip right," they'd laugh. But Maria didn't care. Something about him, the sadness behind his silence, made her feel he just needed kindness more than service. Then one cold Thursday morning, everything changed. The old man didn't show up. For the first time in 3 years, his corner booth sat empty. Maria tried to brush it off, but by noon, 4 men in dark suits walked in, followed by 2 bodyguards. They asked for her by name, and when they placed a sealed envelope on the counter, the entire diner went silent. Maria stood frozen, her notepad still in hand, the smell of coffee and grease thick in the air. The 4 men in suits looked completely out of place. Polished shoes, tailored coats, and a calm authority that made everyone around instinctively step back. The one in front, tall and gray-haired, adjusted his glasses and said quietly, "Are you Maria Collins?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, that's me." He nodded, exchanged glances with the others, and slid the sealed envelope closer across the counter. "This is for you. From Mr. Walter Green." Maria blinked. "I don't know any Mr. Green." The man's expression softened. "Yes, you do." And with that, he turned and walked out, the others following silently behind him. The door chimed as it shut, leaving Maria staring at the envelope that suddenly felt heavier than it should. That night, long after the diner had closed and the neon sign flickered against the rain-soaked street, Maria finally tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, trembling lines across cream paper. "Dear Maria, if you are reading this, it means my time here has ended. I was the old man you served every morning, Walter Green. You never asked for anything, never treated me differently, never looked away. For someone like me, that meant everything. I have left something for you, something I should have done long ago. My attorneys will explain. Thank you for your kindness. You reminded me what humanity still looks like. W.G." Maria's hand shook. She read it again and again. "Something for you? Attorneys?" She thought it was a cruel joke. Maybe a prank someone in the diner was pulling. But the next morning, before the sun rose, the same black car from yesterday was waiting outside her small apartment. Inside the car, the men were polite but firm. "Mr. Green had very specific instructions," one said. "We're to take you to his estate for formal proceedings." Maria pressed her palms together. "His estate?" "Yes," he replied. "Mr. Green was the founder of Green and Lang Holdings. You may have known it as one of the largest property firms in the state." Maria's breath caught. She had cleaned tables her whole life, barely earning enough to pay rent. And now they were saying the old man she served pancakes to every morning was a billionaire? The drive took them an hour outside the city. When the car finally stopped, Maria stared through the window. Sprawling gardens, a marble driveway, and a mansion so large it didn't seem real. Her chest tightened as they led her inside. The main hall smelled faintly of cedar and age. Portraits lined the walls, generations of white men in suits, their eyes following her every step. She felt painfully out of place in her faded uniform and sneakers. A woman in a gray skirt suit appeared. "Miss Collins, I'm Lydia Hall, executor of Mr. Green's will." Maria nodded nervously. Lydia gestured for her to sit. "Before we begin, I need you to understand that Mr. Green had no living heirs. His estate was vast, properties, stocks, and charitable assets. And in his final statement, he mentioned you." Maria's voice trembled. "Mentioned me? For what?" Lydia smiled faintly. "For kindness, for dignity, for being the only person who ever looked at him without judgment." She reached into a folder and slid another envelope across the polished oak table. "He left you something that changed all of our lives." "Ms. Collins, Maria hesitated before opening it, unaware that the moment she did, the world she knew would never be the same again. Maria's fingers trembled as she unsealed the second envelope. Inside was not money, not jewelry, not even a key, but a single folded legal document embossed with the Green and Lang insignia. The words at the top made her heart stop. Transfer of primary ownership, Green and Lang Holdings, Inc. For a moment, her mind went blank. She blinked again, reading the line over and over. It couldn't be real. Her name, Maria L. Collins, was typed clearly beneath the words, beneficiary of controlling interest. Her breath came shallow. There must be a mistake, she whispered. Lydia Hall's expression didn't change. No mistake, Ms. Collins. Mr. Green's estate has been verified and executed according to his wishes. You now hold 61% of Green and Lang Holdings. Maria shook her head violently. No, I'm just a waitress. I don't even own my apartment. Lydia leaned forward gently. Mr. Green knew exactly who you were. He said you were the only person who ever treated him like one. Outside the towering windows, thunder rumbled. The storm clouds rolling in mirrored the chaos swelling inside her chest. She felt small, almost invisible, as if the grand chandelier above was about to expose her as a fraud. When she finally stepped out of that mansion hours later, her world no longer felt like hers. Cameras flashed from behind the wrought iron gates. Reporters screamed questions. Maria! Is it true you inherited the Green estate? Do you think you deserved it? How does it feel taking a white man's empire? The words taking a white man's empire stabbed deeper than she expected. Within days, headlines flooded the news. Black waitress inherits billion-dollar company. Charity or controversy? The Green legacy in question, the public divided overnight. Some praised it as poetic justice, kindness rewarded in a world that rarely noticed it. Others, especially within Green and Lang, saw it as an outrage. Inside the boardrooms of the company she now technically owned, the resentment festered. Suits and ties that had once bowed to Walter Green now looked at Maria as an intruder, a symbol of what they thought didn't belong. At her first board meeting, whispers filled the air before she even entered the room. She's not one of us. She probably can't even read a balance sheet. This is charity gone mad. Maria walked in quietly, wearing a simple white blouse and a blazer borrowed from her neighbor. Her heart hammered as all eyes turned to her. She didn't speak much, just listened, observing the cold glances, the smirks, the calculated disrespect. One man, Mr. Carlson, an executive who had worked under Green for decades, stood up mid-meeting and said bluntly, "With all due respect, Ms. Collins, this company was built by generations of men who understood business. We can't afford to have someone without experience dictate its direction. I move that the board take temporary control until you're trained." The word trained burned in her ears. Lydia, seated beside her, clenched her jaw. "That would be illegal under the current Inheritance Act," she said sharply. "Ms. Collins holds controlling interest. The board reports to her." The room fell silent. Carlson's eyes narrowed, a glare that promised war. Over the next few weeks, Maria learned the taste of quiet humiliation. Meetings were held without her. Emails mysteriously didn't send. Her ideas were ignored, her presence dismissed. The same people who had once shaken Green's hand now treated her as if she were a placeholder, a charity case to tolerate until she gave up. But she didn't give up. She showed up every single day. Late into the nights, she sat in her small apartment surrounded by boxes of company files, learning what every number, contract, and asset meant. She taught herself corporate language from scratch. Every coffee break was replaced with research. Every hour of sleep sacrificed to understanding the empire she never asked for but now carried. And slowly, she started to see what others didn't want her to. Hidden within old reports were patterns, properties undervalued, funds misplaced, contracts awarded to shadow companies that didn't exist. Green and Lang had rot buried beneath its marble floors, and at the center of it all, Mr. Carlson's name appeared again and again. The next morning, she walked into the office with a calm fire in her eyes. Her uniform from the diner was gone, replaced with a charcoal suit and a quiet, unshakable presence. The receptionist who once ignored her now stood up the moment she entered. Carlson was in mid-conversation when she stepped into the boardroom. "We weren't expecting you, Miss Collins," he said flatly. Maria smiled slightly. "I noticed." She laid down a folder on the table. "These," she said, "are records of every offshore account tied to Green and Lang's missing funds over the past 5 years. Including your signature on 4 of them." The color drained from his face. "You thought an old man was too weak to see it," she continued softly. "But he did. He just didn't have time to fight you, so he left it to someone who would." Silence filled the room. Even the air conditioning hum seemed to vanish. Carlson forced a smirk. "You don't have proof." Maria's eyes didn't waver. "The audit begins Monday. I've already called federal investigators. By evening, the company's internal chat threads were chaos. Executives panicked, lawyers scrambled, and Carlson's allies began to abandon him. Maria sat alone in Green's old office, the one no one had touched since his death. Through the window, the city lights glimmered, reflecting off the desk where he used to sit. On it, she placed a small photo of him she'd found in the archives, the same man she'd served eggs and coffee to every morning. She whispered quietly, "You trusted me with your legacy. Now I understand why." Her phone buzzed. Lydia's message appeared. "They're furious. Carlson just called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. Be ready." Maria closed her eyes. The war wasn't over, and it had only begun. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of being unseen, because now the whole world was watching. The next morning, the city skyline burned gold through the glass towers as Maria stepped out of the elevator, her reflection steady in the chrome doors. Gone was the trembling waitress. In her place stood a woman who had learned the power of silence, the strength of patience, and the weapon of truth. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was electric, not with excitement, but fear disguised as formality. Mr. Carlson sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his allies trying to mask the panic in his eyes. Cameras flashed outside the frosted glass. Journalists had caught wind of the internal dispute at Green and Lang Holdings. "Ms. Collins," Carlson began with forced calm, "thank you for joining us on such short notice. We've reviewed your allegations, and while they are interesting, they lack context. Mr. Green's estate was complicated. I suggest we move past these distractions and focus on the company's reputation." Maria pulled out her chair slowly and sat down opposite him. "You're right," she said softly. "Reputation matters, especially when it's about to be broadcast live." Carlson frowned. "Broadcast?" She turned toward the corner of the room. 2 men in suits entered, followed by a woman holding a press badge. A news crew, already rolling their cameras. "Transparency," Maria said, her voice steady. "The public deserves to know how Green and Lang treated both its founder and the people who built his fortune." Carlson shot to his feet. "You have no right. I own this company," she cut in sharply. "And as of this morning, the federal auditors you ignored for years are in the lobby. You can either cooperate or explain your version on record." A hush fell across the table. The executives shifted uncomfortably. Maria opened a folder filled with printed evidence. Offshore transactions, falsified expense accounts, and emails signed under Carlson's authority. The camera lights glinted off the paper as she slid it forward. "Walter Green may have built this empire," she said, "but you turned it into a machine that fed on greed. And when he stopped looking the other way, you tried to bury him behind paperwork and silence. That ends today." Carlson's composure cracked. "You think anyone's going to believe a waitress who lucked into wealth?" Maria leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "No," she said quietly. "They'll believe the truth, and the numbers don't lie." Moments later, federal investigators entered the room. Their badges gleamed as they read out warrants. The tension was suffocating. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped, and for the first time, Carlson had nothing to say. Maria stood still, watching as the man who had mocked her, who once smirked at the idea of a black woman running a billion-dollar company, was escorted out in handcuffs. The press outside erupted like thunder. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not yet, because beneath the triumph was grief, not just for the corruption exposed, but for the quiet, lonely man who had sat at her diner booth for years, trying to find peace in a world that had forgotten what kindness looked like. As the investigators left, Lydia approached her gently. "You did it," she whispered. Maria's eyes glistened. "He did it. I just finished what he started." That night, she returned to the diner for the first time since it all began. The same smell of bacon and coffee lingered in the air, the same cracked tiles beneath her feet. But the booth, his booth, was empty. She slid into it quietly, resting her hand on the table. For a moment, she could almost see him there, the old man with the gentle nod and the half-smile. On the counter, the new waitress glanced over and said, "You're Maria, right?" "The one from the news?" Maria smiled faintly. "I used to work here," the girl hesitated. "They say you were kind to some old man. Guess it paid off, huh?" Maria looked out the window, her reflection faint under the flickering neon. "Kindness doesn't pay," she said softly. "It heals." Outside, rain began to fall, gentle, cleansing, almost poetic. And for the first time, Maria felt the weight lift from her shoulders. The storm was over, or so she thought, because 2 days later, a letter arrived. The envelope bore an old wax seal, WG inside. In Walter Green's trembling handwriting was a single line. "If they hated you for helping me, they'll fear you for leading them. Don't stop now." Maria folded the letter carefully, her resolve hardening once more. She knew the fight for fairness didn't end with one victory. It was just beginning, and now she had the voice, the power, and the legacy to make it echo far beyond one man's empire. Maria sat at her small kitchen table, the paper trembling in her hands as she reread Walter Green's final words. "If they hated you for helping me, they'll fear you for leading them. Don't stop now." The candle beside her flickered softly, casting golden shadows across her face. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, traffic horns, rain tapping against the window. But inside, everything was still. For the first time, Maria wasn't afraid of what came next. She folded the letter neatly and slipped it into her purse, right next to the diner name tag she'd kept all these years. That morning, she walked into Green & Lang not as a stranger to wealth, but as its rightful steward, a woman shaped not by privilege, but by perseverance. The media frenzy had cooled, but whispers still followed her in the corridors. The waitress who took over $1 billion empire. The charity case who got lucky. Maria ignored them. She had something else in mind, something Walter would have wanted. Weeks turned into months. Under her leadership, the company changed in ways no one expected. She ordered full transparency reports, raised wages for the lowest staff, and launched the Green Foundation for Equal Opportunity, a program that helped young people from marginalized communities get education and career training. The same executives who once scoffed at her now sat across the table taking notes as she spoke about ethics, equity, and empathy. In press interviews, she didn't talk about herself. She talked about kindness, about how one small act of respect could ripple further than money ever could. Her words began to spread, shared across social media, news outlets, and classrooms. "People say I was lucky," she said once on a live broadcast. "But luck didn't bring me here. Consistency did, decency did, and someone's belief in goodness, even when the world had given up on it." The crowd stood silent, many wiping away tears. Yet in her success, Maria never forgot where she came from. Every Sunday morning, she returned quietly to the diner, not as a celebrity or CEO, but as herself. She sat in that same booth, ordered the same black coffee, and left the same $5 bill under the plate. The new waitress, confused the first few times, eventually smiled when she saw it. A simple ritual, mysterious but sacred. One morning, Maria noticed a young man sweeping the floors, a kid barely out of high school, tired but hopeful. She called him over and said gently, "Do you like working here?" He shrugged. "It's just a job," Maria smiled. "Sometimes the job that doesn't look like much is the one that changes everything." She didn't tell him who she was. She didn't need to. Months later, the Green Foundation opened its first community hub in Willowbrook, the same town where it all began. The building was sleek but humble, standing on the old plot of land where the diner once operated before it closed down. A bronze plaque near the entrance read, "Kindness is not charity, it's courage. In memory of Walter Green and every soul who chose compassion over judgment." The opening ceremony was quiet, dignified. Maria stood beside Lydia, both of them gazing up at the sign as cameras flashed. For a moment, Maria thought she saw a familiar silhouette in the crowd. An old man in a brown coat, smiling faintly before fading into the sunlight. Tears welled in her eyes. But she smiled anyway. Years passed, and Maria's name became more than a story. It became a lesson. Universities taught her case as an example of integrity and redemption. Green and Lang, once synonymous with greed, became a model of corporate responsibility. And somewhere in the echoes of those marble halls, it was said that a framed note still hung on the office wall, the one Maria had left behind when she retired. Don't measure your worth by what the world gives you. Measure it by what you give back, even when no one's watching. The words became the company's new motto. One rainy evening, years later, a journalist asked Maria during a rare interview, "Do you ever regret serving that old man all those mornings?" Maria chuckled softly, her eyes full of calm wisdom. "Regret? No, I served him because he was human. Not because I expected something back. That's the thing about kindness, it finds its own way home." The interviewer smiled. "And what would you say to those who still think you just got lucky?" Maria leaned forward, her voice warm but steady. "Then I hope they keep being lucky, because luck in my world means doing what's right even when no one's watching." The camera's red light blinked off, but her words lingered, not just in the room, but in the hearts of millions watching around the world. Final line, emotional closure and takeaway. Sometimes, the smallest act of compassion in a forgotten corner of the world becomes the spark that burns through generations of prejudice. Maria didn't just inherit an empire, she rewrote what it means to be powerful.